Haribo. Today we are doing Canto 4, Chapter 29, Text 22, Srimad Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Just do a little Mangalacharana first. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udhirayet Nashtaprayeshva Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki Paramananda Pathaya Prema Varshaksharayate Sarvada Sarvasevyaya Shri Krishna Aya Namostume Sarva Vedanta Saram Hi Shri Bhagavatam Ishite Tatra Samrita Chiptasya Nanyatra Shavriti Kvachit Krishna Swadhamo Bhagavate Dharmagana Divi Saha Kalaunashtadasham Esha Puranarko Dhunoditaha Om Ganatimirandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshurin Militam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Tapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vidam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakantikanscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Deenabandhu Trikatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishamanusute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschati Deshatarine Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langayate Girim Yat Kripam Tamaham Vande Shri Gurum Dhinataranam. So we'll begin with text 21. So text 21, we're doing 21 through 33. It's a pretty big section, but mostly we're going over the just kind of little details of what all of the different pieces of this analogy represent, because now the backdrop here is that Prachinabarhi, after hearing the entire analogy of Sri Narada Muni, he has asked for further clarification and has asked to know exactly what all the details of this analogy are so that he knows he has the proper conception, he knows that he's heard it the right way, and so that he can, implicitly, the implicit idea is that he can apply the teachings in the most proper way. So we'll just read the verses. Samvatsaras chandaveka kalo yeno palakshita tasyahaniya gandharva gandharvivaratraya smrita arantyayu parikrantya shashtyutara shatatrayam. What was previously explained as Chandavega, powerful time, is covered by days and nights named Gandharvas and Gandharvis. The body's lifespan is gradually reduced by the passage of days and nights, which number 360. Kalakanya jara sakshal lokastamna vinandati swasaram jagnihe mrityu kshayaya yavaneshwaraha. What was described as Kalakanya should be understood as old age. No one wants to accept old age but Yavaneshwara, Yavanaraj, who is death, accepts Jara, old age, as his sister. Adayo vyadayastasya sainikaya vanaschara bhutopasargashuraya rajvaro dvividojvara evam bahuvidardukayar daiva bhutatma sambhavai kleshyamana shatam varsham dehi dehi tamovrita pranendriya manodharman atmanyadhyasya nirguna chete kamadavandhyayan mamaham iti karmakrit. The followers of Yavaneshwara or Yamaraj are called the soldiers of death, and they are known as the various types of disturbances that pertain to the body and mind. Prajwara represents the two types of fever, extreme heat and extreme cold, typhoid and pneumonia. The living entity lying down within the body is disturbed by many tribulations pertaining to providence, to other living entities, and to his own body and mind. Despite all kinds of tribulations, the living entity subjected to the necessities of the body, mind, and senses, and suffering from various types of disease, is carried away by many plans due to his lust to enjoy the world. Although transcendental to this material existence, the living entity, out of ignorance, accepts all these material miseries under the pretext of false egoism, I and mine. In this way, he lives for 100 years within this body. Yadatmanam avijnaya bhagavantam param gurum purushastu visajjeta guneshu prakrite swadrik kunabhimani satada karmani kurute vasha shuklam krishnam lohitam va yata karma abhijayate. The living entity by nature has minute independence to choose his own good or bad fortune, but when he forgets his supreme master, the personality of Godhead, he gives himself up unto the modes of material nature. Being influenced by the modes of material nature, he identifies himself with the body, and for the interest of the body becomes attached to various activities. Sometimes he is under the influence of the mode of ignorance, sometimes under the mode of passion, and sometimes the mode of goodness. The living entity thus gets different types of bodies under the modes of material nature. Shuklat prakashabhu yishtal lokan apnotikar hijit Duko darkan kriyayams dhamma shoko takan kvachit. Those who are situated in the mode of goodness act piously according to Vedic injunctions. Thus, they are elevated to the higher planetary systems where the demigods live. Those who are influenced by the modes of passion engage in various types of productive activities in the planetary systems where human beings live. Similarly, those influenced by the mode of darkness are subjected to various types of misery and live in the animal kingdom. Kvachit puman kvachit chastri kvachinno bhayamandati devamanushastiriyagpa yata karma gunam bhava. Covered by the mode of ignorance and material nature, the living entity is sometimes a male, sometimes a female, sometimes a eunuch, sometimes a human being, sometimes a demigod, sometimes a bird, an animal, and so on. In this way, he is wandering within the material world. His acceptance of different types of bodies is brought about by his activities under the influence of the modes of nature. Kshutparito yatadhina sarameyo griham griham charan vindanti addishnam dandam abudanamevava tata kamashayo jiva uchavacha pata pramam uparyado vamadyeva yati dishnam priya priyam. The living entity is exactly like a dog who, overcome with hunger, goes from door to door for some food. According to his destiny, he sometimes receives punishment and is driven out, and at other times receives a little food to eat. Similarly, the living entity, being influenced by so many desires, wanders in different species of life according to his destiny. Sometimes he is high and sometimes he is low. Sometimes he goes to the heavenly planets, sometimes to hell, sometimes to the middle planets, and so on. So I want to read the purport by Srila Prabhupada here because I think this is just such a lucid purport, and he brings a lot of points here which are really nice to take and meditate on. So we'll see if we can unfold something. Maybe there will be some discussion from the side, from the chat box on Facebook, and maybe Mukunda will have a little contribution. The living entity's position is herein likened to a dog's. By chance, a dog may have a very rich owner, and by chance he may become a street dog. As the dog of a rich man, he will live very opulently. Sometimes in Western countries, we hear of a master leaving millions of dollars to a dog in his will. Of course, there are many dogs loitering in the street without food. Therefore, to liken the conditional existence of the living entity to that of a dog is very appropriate. An intelligent human being, however, can understand that if he has to live the life of a dog, he had best become Krishna's dog. In the material world, a dog is sometimes elevated and is sometimes on the street. But in the spiritual world, Krishna's dog is perpetually, eternally happy. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur has therefore sung Vaishnava Thakura Tomara Kukura Baliya Janaha More. In this way, Bhaktivinoda Thakur offers to become a Vaishnav's dog. A dog always keeps himself at his master's door and does not allow any person unfavorable to the master to enter. Similarly, one should engage in the service of a Vaishnava and try to please him in every respect. Unless one does so, he does not make spiritual advancement. Apart from spiritual advancement, in the material world, if one does not develop his qualities in goodness, he cannot be promoted to the higher planetary system, as confirmed by Bhagavad Gita. Urdhvam gachanti sattvasta madhye tishtanti rajasah chaganya guna vrittista ado gachanti tamasah. Those situated in the mode of goodness gradually go upward to the higher planets. Those in the mode of passion live on the earthly planets, and those in the mode of ignorance go down to the hellish worlds. There are many varieties of life in the different planetary systems, and these come about due to the living entities developing his qualities in goodness, passion, and ignorance. If one is in goodness, he is promoted to the higher systems. If in passion, he remains in the middle systems, and if in ignorance, he is pushed down to the lower species of life. So looking at the first part of this purport, Prabhupada is really, he's pointing out the relative nature of conditional existence and what is required of everybody who is moving towards the spiritual path is just kind of an impartial weighing of the way their existence is and how it is so relative and flickering and how sometimes we're up and sometimes we're down. So the analogy of a dog is used here by Narada Muni and expanded on by Srila Prabhupada to show that consistently we find ourselves in high positions and low positions. Sometimes things are going really well and sometimes things are quite a struggle. And if we look at this and if we look in retrospect at our lives, we can see that this is a consistent theme. And happiness in life is largely predicated on a certain blissful ignorance that allows one to pretend that the good times are going to last perpetually. Because if one becomes a little thoughtful and looks back and sees that, oh, actually, this is probably going to end because in the past I've had a good time. And then inevitably difficulties come. And so when one starts to see this kind of patterning in life and sees that they're not able to become fully absorbed in the happiness that comes to them in a material way, because they see the inevitable onset of sadness or at best, at best or in the least sense, at least complacency or boredom, then they're also no longer able to lose themselves in what they previously considered to be happiness. This is really one of the preliminary realizations that comes to anyone who's moving in a spiritual direction, because it's so fundamental to the way this world works, and it's one of the most easily observable things that we can see. So the Bhagavatam speaks about this in the third canto. There's a famous verse, it's 3.7.17, or it's 3.17.7. I can never remember exact which one it is. I don't have the third canto in front of me. But basically, what the verse is saying is that there are two types of people who are able to enjoy in this world. One is the Paramahamsa. The self-realized person is able to enjoy in this world because he's completely in touch with the Ananda of the internal potency of the Lord. So he is always experiencing bliss. And the other type of person is the complete fool, for the principle that I just spoke about. So someone who is utterly devoid of any type of substantial knowledge. And we see this out in the world. And I can see it in myself previously in the way I was able to kind of become absorbed in things which are temporary. And to a large degree, this is a spectrum. I'm not saying that that doesn't happen to me, but certainly the ability to come to the completion state of material absorption has come down some. I have enough conceptual understanding that I can't really enjoy things on a material level, and therefore I'm not able to fully absorb myself in them to the degree that I could before. So a fool, he can become absorbed in things because he doesn't think about the fact that they're going to end. He's able to literally just absorb himself in the moment, and because he doesn't have knowledge, he not only does he forget that they're temporary, but he doesn't realize they're temporary to start with. So if you're not a Paramahamsa, or you're not a fool, then you're not able to relish anything in this world to any true degree. In other words, you're stuck in a type of purgatory where you can't move forward, but you also can't move backwards, because it's the nature of knowledge that when one has knowledge, one is convinced about something, one does not have a choice to give that up. When one realizes a certain level of truth, then that truth cannot just be set aside. We may be able to act against the truth that we have realized, but we are powerless to undo our realization of that particular truth. And so this causes strife, dejection, existential depression. It causes all sorts of negative things if we don't move in a spiritual direction. Because actually what happens is when one imbibes a certain level of knowledge, they have no choice to go anywhere but forward. So this is what's being highlighted here by Srila Prabhupada and by Srila Narada Muni. I should say Srila Narada Muni and Srila Prabhupada, with this analogy of a dog. And Srila Prabhupada takes it a step further, and he says that if one realizes this, if one is a little introspective and he understands that these things are just flickering, they're just going back and forth, happiness, sadness, up, down, a good situation, a bad situation, then one should realize that actually in all of this, there's another lesson. I am forced to serve someone. I'm forced to serve something. I'm a dog in the sense that no matter what, I'm not independent in and of myself. I don't get to make full choices as to how my life is going to go. In the modern world, we like to say, freedom and liberty and rights and, everything is my right. This is my right to do this, to do that. But we rarely recognize the fundamental truth that my entire life is dictated by some circumstance or other. All of my choices, all of my likes and my dislikes, these are all predicated by the society that I live in, by the variables that constitute my life, where I live, who I live with, what I have to do in order to maintain my existence, all the way down to the fundamentals of the fact that I have to use the bathroom when my body tells me to. So our life is predicated. We have some will to choose what direction we're going to go, but that will is not free in the absolutely independent sense. It's free in the sense that we have a part to play in the grand scheme of things. So the ultimate message there is that one has to serve. One either has to serve circumstances one doesn't want to because he's forced, or one has the ability to align himself with circumstances that he agrees with, and if he's thoughtful, that he sees are going to be for his ultimate betterment. So Prabhupada here, Srila Prabhupada here is saying that if one recognizes that one is a dog, then he should become Krishna's dog. He should ultimately serve a master who has his best interest at hand. And then he goes further and he quotes a prayer by Bhaktivinoda Thakur from one of his wonderful songbooks, where the essence of the prayer is, "O Vaishnav Thakur, you are my master and I am your dog, and I would like to continue to serve you perpetually." Let me just reread that, just to be totally clear. Vaishnava Thakura Tomara Kukura Bolia Jana Hamone. Yeah, so he's saying, I am your dog. Tomara Kukura, I am your dog. O Vaishnava Thakur, please accept me as your dog. And Srila Prabhupada highlights further that this is actually the only way to solve this problem of material existence. The only way to make any real spiritual advancement is to find a Vaishnava and to serve them. And our acharyas explain that this is how bhakti starts. This is how the ultimate beatitude, or the ultimate completion state of the living entity begins to come to fulfillment, begins to come to fruition. Is one comes in touch with a Vaishnava, and then through coming in touch with that Vaishnava, one actually becomes fortunate. One becomes a Bhagyavan Jiva. He becomes someone who has some fortune. He becomes fortunate. Because through that contact, one is able to actually get an access point to spiritual existence. Because bhakti is a safeguarded thing. It is not a cheap thing because it's very, very intimate. It is literally synonymous with Krishna's heart. And so only people who are already there, who are already situated in that club, so to speak, are able to invite people in. And we see this is how every good thing in this world is. Every good thing is exclusive. Every good thing has some sort of a qualification or an invitation or a way that it is able to be safeguarded so that not anyone and everyone can just barge their way in. If somebody wants to attain something which is actually worth it, then they have to prove themselves to some degree. And also, not only do they have to prove themselves, but they have to get approval. So the Vaishnavas, they are the approvers of Krishna's realm. They're the ones who say, yes, this person, he's sincere. Because what are they looking at? They're not looking for somebody's qualifications on a material level. They're not looking to say, oh, he's smart enough. We should have him in the Vaishnav club. He's good enough. He's he went to school in this way. They're looking for sincerity. They're looking for somebody who is exhausted and who is actually ready to hear the message of Krishna and who's actually ready to hear the message of the Bhagavatam. And they're looking for people who sincerely want to enter into a substantial reality, who really want to know themselves on the deepest intrinsic level. And so one has to approach one of these Vaishnavas in order to begin his path. And one has to show their sincerity. And then ultimately one just has to surrender and hope to attain the merciful glance of that Vaishnava, which sounds difficult, but actually it's very easy because Vaishnavas constantly want to give out Krishna's mercy. Because it is the nature of somebody that they want to share something wonderful if they experience it. Yeah, I give you the analogy. I always talk about cheesecake because cheesecake is something that's very dear to my heart. So if I go to a restaurant and I order a strawberry cheesecake and it's exceptionally good, say it's the best cheesecake I've ever had to this point in my life, what's the first thing I'm going to do after eating that cheesecake? I'm going to rant and rave about it to my friends. I'm going to message people and tell them, hey, you have got to check out so-and-so restaurant. If you don't have anything else, just go in there and grab a piece of cheesecake. Because this is the natural kind of reaction that we have to getting things that are good, is we want to tell other people about them. We want to share the news. So this is what the Vaishnavas want to do. They're sitting in this world and they're experiencing the bliss of Krishna consciousness. They're experiencing the actual reality as it is. And so they are just thinking, man, I wish I could share this. Because even in a passive sense, because they're experiencing that at every moment, or they have some experience of it, whenever they speak to somebody, somehow or other their experience and their consciousness gets drawn in that direction, so they can't help but speak about it. So the only difficulty here is that the thing that a Vaishnava quickly realizes is that people don't want what he has to share. People come for all sorts of ulterior motives. And they say, yes, 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 I want this, I want ultimate beatitude, I want reality, I want Krishna. But at the end of the day, what they're really saying is, I want to get away from my sufferings. So one has to approach a Vaishnava, because through a Vaishnava, one actually gets some sort of a kind of vicarious remote taste through their experience that allows one to aspire for something more than the cessation of their own suffering. It gives one the conceptual orientation, or the seeds of a conceptual orientation, that allows one to actually focus on the positive. Because in this world, the only thing we have is pain and the cessation of pain. The things we see as pleasure they really fall into two categories: the cessation of pain, or the expectation of getting something which is going to lead to happiness. But time and time again, if we look back on our lives, we can understand that really the level of happiness we derive from something that we attain is directly proportionate to the expectation we put into its attainment, which is why in this world things seem more substantial when we have to work them. The more expectation we can build, then the more seeming pleasure we're able to get on the relative plane out of that thing. So an intelligent man will see that this is not how happiness should actually work. You can hack the system and make sure you always are doing things which are very difficult to do so that you can get that reward. But that reward is still relative, and it's predicated on the basis of how much work you put into it. Because this world, it runs on a kind of universal law of opposites. The more you enjoy, the less you can enjoy, and the more austerity you undergo, the more difficulty you go through, the more hard work you put in, then you get to enjoy a little bit. So this is an exhausting process. And ultimately, it doesn't leave an entity which is meant for constant, never-ending bliss fulfilled. Because that's what every living entity is. That's what every jiva is. That's what you are. That's what I am. We're all meant to taste something which is never-endingly happy. Which is why we have such a drive to continue trying to experience things, even in the face of all the pain. Even in the face of all the difficulty and strife and letdown that is in this world. Deeply, it's intrinsically a part of us that we know I'm meant to be enjoying something eternal. I'm meant to be enjoying something that's not supposed to be hard work and is always supposed to be bliss. And this is also why, even against the laws of the way this world works, we are consistently trying to find something that will let us just maintain some level of bliss. Even though we know on some fundamental level, if I just enjoy, then my level of enjoyment is going to go away. Like if I just eat cheesecake only, and really I don't do any work, I don't do anything, I just, every hour I have a piece of cheesecake, within 2, 3, 4, 5 hours, it's no longer going to taste any good. So we know that, but still we try to find ways and means, which is another reason why we see one of the most, it's kind of paradoxical, one of the most depraved things that we see in this world, that everybody in this world looks at as low and negative, is addiction. Particularly drug addiction. And what is that? It's simply somebody trying to relish a state of happiness consistently. And we see it as abominable because we know it goes completely against the way this world works. It goes completely against the fact that if you don't space out your enjoyment here, and if you don't work hard for enjoyment in the right way, which under the Vedic canon means through Dharma, then your life is quickly going to move into shambles, because that's what happens to every drug addict. Any one of us has seen this. Life quickly becomes shambles. The body falls apart. The mind falls apart. You become nearly subhuman in that state. And people who are in that state admit that about themselves. This isn't a judgment from me. You become nearly subhuman. Why? Because the world isn't set up for that. But the jiva, the living entity, his desire is to enjoy like that, which is why it's so powerful. And also why it's so hard for people to break that. Because at some level, they understand that this is ultimately, it's a shadow of what I'm meant for. And it's such a palpable experience, the bliss that's coming from those things, that I don't actually have any reason to do anything else. Because this system of work hard, get a little happiness, work hard to make the happiness enjoyable, it doesn't actually fulfill. So an intelligent man will think this system is broken. And really the system isn't broken, it's meant to teach us that it's exhausting, so that then we can repose our energies in a different way. We can find a way to live which will allow us to do the work which is bliss, so that we can also enjoy, where everything is actually all bliss. So this is what one gets by coming into contact with the Vaishnava. This is what the conceptual orientation and the seeds of the proper conception of existence, which one gets, that coming in contact with the Vaishnava affords. So we've got one more verse or two more verses. I'll just read those and then we'll see where we end up, and we'll stop soon. This is text 32. Dukeshveka tarenapi daiva putat mahetushu jivasya na vyavacheda shachcheta tad pratikriya. The living entities are trying to counteract different miserable conditions pertaining to providence, other living entities, or the body and the mind. Still, they must remain conditioned by the laws of nature, despite all attempts to counter these laws. So this goes right along the same principles, that because of a fundamental misunderstanding of the way the laws of the world work, then we're constantly fighting against them. But the point is not to understand how they work and then work in that system. The point is to understand that I'm not actually meant for this system. That this system is not going to bring me any level of fulfillment on a real intrinsic, it's not going to bring me any fulfillment on a real intrinsic level. It's not going to, it's really, I'm not compatible with this world on a fundamental level. It's like trying to put a square peg in a round hole. It just doesn't work. The things don't work. Yatahi purusho param shirasa gurum udvahan tam skandena sa'adate tata sarva pratikriya. A man may carry a burden on his head, and when he feels it to be too heavy, he sometimes gives relief to his head by putting the burden on his shoulder. In this way, he tries to relieve himself of the burden. However, whatever process he devises to counteract the burden does nothing more than put the same burden from one place to another. So this is what we do. If we don't realize this and we just fall into the middle ground and we come to a certain level of knowledge where we understand the system, then we just kind of juggle the pain. So that we think, because this is what happens. Say you're carrying something very heavy on your head and it starts to hurt your neck, or if you've ever carried something, your arm in a particular position, your arm will become very tired. And then you shift to the other arm. And what happens? You don't feel the burden in a painful way over here, and you feel relief over here. This arm now feels good. I've removed that burden, and you put it here. So this is all we're doing. We're shifting, holding it by my belly, holding it on my right shoulder, my left shoulder. Now I'll put it on my head and hold it with both hands. Now I'll fasten some straps and tie it to my backpack. But ultimately, these things are stopgap measures, and we're just shifting the burden around, shifting the burden around. So this world isn't actually meant to be adjusted to. This world, I guess that's the theme that we come to in this class. This world is meant to be realized as exhausting. And when we realize that this world is exhausting, we don't become disgusted by it, because that's also not the process of bhakti. But we simply become sober to it. And by becoming sober to it, we realize that I need to put my energy elsewhere. I need to put my energy in a realm of reality which is meant for me and which I can actually gain some energy from and then give some energy back to. Because this world is only going to exhaust us, beat us down, and break us. Because that's what it's meant to do. And that's actually mercy. We're lucky for that. Because if it wasn't so strict in that regard, then we could become complacent. And we still also wouldn't be able to relish the ecstasy of transcendental existence, because we would have no impetus to try to find it. So we should also be happy about this. We shouldn't become morbid that, oh, this world is so terrible and difficult and hard. No, this world is an opportunity. And through the opportunities presented by this world, we can actually come to some realization of what we are and what we're meant for. So I'll stop there. I don't know if anyone has anything. We'll just give a minute or two. See if anyone has anything to contribute, or maybe Mukunda has some sage words for us. Let's see. Doesn't look like we have anything in the chat. Okay, nice, short and sweet. I don't know about sweet, but short, sweet for me. It's always nice to get a chance to speak about the Bhagavatam. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Vaishnava Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Vanchakalpa Tarikascha. Alright, well, hope everybody has a wonderful day and stays a little warm. If you're in Michigan, I know we get some people from all over the world, so